I'm Corbett Wall with USDA Livestock and Grain Market News, here with your weekly feeder and stocker cattle market summary for the week ending April the 26th, where this up and down market just kept going up and down, and this week was a week for it to be up. Feeder cattle opened slightly higher early on Monday and throughout that day, turning more sharply higher at least by midday Tuesday, and for sure on Wednesday, as your midweek trade was a lot higher than the early week trade, and ended up closing the week on your heavy feeder cattle $2 to $6 higher, with the full advance noted on your big yearling feeders weighing over 8.5. Now, stocker cattle and calves in the plains and the Midwest, they pretty much took the same route, getting higher. They started out kind of strong and then got progressively higher. By Wednesday, for sure, when we had the weather turn around, there was little skips of snow out in the Midwest and the plains on Monday and Tuesday there, but Wednesday turned off real nice, and then the forecast was what really did it. But your calves jumped up, and stocker cattle $5 to $10 higher in the plains and the Midwest and out in Colorado and places like that where they were tested. But so many of those places don't have a good test on calves this time of year and right now that it was hard to tell really. But for sure where they were tested in Colorado, Missouri, up Nebraska, and the few spots in Oklahoma and Kansas where they really had them. Down in the southeast, they really didn't realize all that. By the time the demand had really reached its potential, most of the trade was already over. They have a lot of big Monday sales, and those shippers, they were kind of strapped to what they told their customers those cattle were going to cost. So whatever they started out with Monday, they might have tried a little harder, but they couldn't go a whole lot beyond that. And by the time the week was over, your southeastern calf markets were really just uneven, from $3 lower to $3 higher. But looking into next week, your Monday markets haven't experienced a whole lot of the advance that the rest of the market saw. So we should see a good market early in the week to start the week for on the cash side anyway. But it's just the volatility is just up and down, and the market's really the same it's been for the last several weeks, up and down. And it's hard to tell what it's going to do. We're just down $10 one week and up $10 the next week, and the moves that it's making just in 1 week's trading session is enough to be the difference between losing quite a bit of money or coming out, or vice versa, making money or just barely breaking even. And these producers are really lost knowing what to do, and the analysts can't help them. I'm glad that I'm dealing in historical markets for the most part, because I don't know how you would pin down what it is. Now this week, we knew that if the weather straightened out, that this thing would get a little more pep in it, and it did. And it wasn't really the weather, it's just the forecast of weather. And this weekend's to be nice. Next week's supposed to get into some of those temperatures like we ought to be seeing this time of year, up in the 70s and 80s, and making that grass grow and drying things out where these guys can plant corn and get busy working. And if that continues, you could think that the market would continue to do that, but it doesn't really pay any attention to any one thing. You would think that the markets would have been lower this week because of the bearish cattle on feed report they had on Friday. Nobody saw that those placements numbers were going to be that bearish, and Monday started out and barely paid any attention to it. And then Tuesday and Wednesday feeder board was up strong and made big gains there, and it was just really turned this thing around. And by Tuesday afternoon, nobody even remembered what that cattle on feed report said. But it's just attitudes. And these buyers are coming in here, they're either all in or they're all out. When the market's higher, everybody wants them. When it's lower, you can't sell one. But it's just really tough because nobody's been able to make any money in the cattle market for really in the last 6 months. Nobody's made any money. Your stocker operators, backgrounders, your cattle feeders have lost money. There's hardly any way to turn a profit or even break even the way these feed costs have been and availability. Your packers have been operating with negative margins. Now most of the time when the cattle are bought too high to make any money, then the cow-calf guy is making some money. But this past year, due to the feed shortages and the droughts and and water shortages. Your cow-calf man hasn't been able to make any money either. His expenses are just a whole lot more than what they normally are, and the market is not to that point, and it's just been a tough time. Nobody making any money, but everybody knows that when times look the toughest, that's when you better be in, because it could get better. Everybody wants to be in on some cattle when this thing turns around and there's some profit to be had. So everybody's just leery to jump in the market, but as soon as they see one guy jump, then they want to get in too. And it's just making these markets really volatile. But receipts were higher again this week, heavier receipts, and have been this whole month of April. So don't be surprised if that placement number next month doesn't show what we had a lot of placements, because we have had a lot of feeder cattle sell in the auctions. The Northern Plains had a good run this week. A lot of those bigger sales had a sale this week. They've gone to every other week, or maybe every 2 or 3 weeks having a sale. And the weather cooperated for the most part. And get up in Nebraska and the Dakotas, they had pretty good sales this week. At Bassett, Nebraska, they had a really good sale there. Had a string of non-hormone treated cattle, which is kind of a big deal up there. Those NHTCs they call them, but they've got the tag in their ear and the signed affidavit. But a 250 head string of 715 pound steers bring 155.75. Another 2 loads non-hormone 845 pound steers bring 140.10. So these markets it just doesn't take very much when they jump 10, 15, 20 bucks in 1 week to the next. But also we're seeing these replacements come back in the places where they've got moisture, and out towards the Mississippi River, where it's jumped its banks in a lot of spots, and close by there at the Eastern Missouri Commission Company in Bowling Green, Missouri, which would be north of St. Louis and south of Hannibal. But they can sell their bred cows and pairs pretty good right there. And last Friday, after this report was issued, their first and second calf heifer pairs had blacks and had red Angus in there, but the top quality kinds, and not giant calves either, just 150, 200 pound calves, but those young pairs bringing $2,225 or up to $2,875. Well, we thought maybe a year ago that the pairs would be bringing that, but we haven't seen it very many places. But places that's got moisture can still do it. Fed cattle market back up to the glass ceiling, $2 to $3 higher, from 128 to 130. Talking in the sale barns this week, Monday, Tuesday, and even Wednesday morning, nobody thought they'd get more money. That the board just kept kind of coming up, and packers kept hanging on, and we had a higher market. Regional weighted averages this week and your feeder cattle auctions. North Central states, 8 to 900 pound steer cost you $131.03 this week, compared to $127.26 last week, $143.36 a year ago. Down in the South Central states, a 7 to 800 pound steer cost you $134.07, compared to $132.51 last week and $148.71 a year ago. And in the Southeast, 5 to 600 pound steer, not a lot of gain there. $142.41 this week, compared to $140.66 last week and $166.79 a year ago. That wraps up your feeder market summary for this week. Check out our website for more market information at marketnews.usda.gov. And from the Regional Market News Office in St. Joe, Missouri, we'll talk to you next week.